Happy Engineer, welcome back. And Jeff, welcome back. Round two. Thanks for making time to join us again on the Happy Engineer podcast, man.
Zach White, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. You're always full of energy and goodness and happiness. I'm glad to be here.
So, Jeff, since our last conversation, back on episode 64, which, wow, I can't believe it's been 100 episodes since our last conversation. It doesn't feel like 100 episodes ago to me, but 64. If
You've
someone
been busy.
didn't, yeah, so have you. You have been very busy. In fact, part of why we're here is you invested no small chunk of your life into writing an incredible book, The Intentional Engineer, which everything about the title, the topic, and the work that you've created here, I love. And naturally, like, we got to dig into this here on the show. But I love listening to authors in general on podcasts. I think about Malcolm Gladwell on his masterclass, or Seth Godin gets interviewed all the time, and Robert Greene gets interviewed. And sometimes they'll talk about their writing process. You know, what's their routine or their ritual around writing their books. And so none of them are engineers. Jeff, how does an engineer go about the process of writing a book?
So, like you, Zach, I've been creating content and writing and speaking and training and coaching for a number of years now. And I care deeply about investing in myself and getting coaching and mentoring and stuff to continue to help improve me. And there's one program that I'm a part of right now that's really focused on building your thought leadership. And so writing books is a big piece of that for a lot of that community. And I had one of my mentors in that program that I was having a conversation with, that in the course of a day or two, with this kind of weekend immersion experience that we were having. And they're like, hey, when are you going to write your first book? And I've had in the back of my mind, I don't know how long, like, yeah, there's a book in me somewhere. Anyway, but there was finally one of those that broke through and was like, hey, when are you going to write that book? A few months from that point, I had lined up to speak at an engineering conference for ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And they were also giving me like an exhibit booth. And so I had this moment of like, oh man, wait just a second. How cool would that be for me to show up to the conference and have a booth where I can talk to a bunch of people and have my book on the table as well?
Ooh.
Okay. So it was critical for me to not just have the idea of a book, but to have a forcing function and a purpose and an event that I was shooting for. Okay. And so then the end date was in sight, which, by the way, was only about 3.5 months from the moment that I committed to writing the book.
Wow. That's a non-trivial timeline for writing a book. Okay, keep going. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, and then I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So then after I had that conversation with the mentor, I even walked upstairs and told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to write a book right now. And I think I'm going to publish it in about 3 months. She's like, okay, yeah, I think you're going to as well. And a few other stars aligned. I connected with another guy who has a 90-day publish a book program. His wife is an editor and she's fantastic. And so I read that plan. I outlined everything I needed to do. And quite frankly, the first month was writing the first draft. The second month was editing. And the third month was getting the publishing done.
So cool.
Now, as far as curating a book's worth of content in a month, that sounds crazy. But mind you, again, I've been writing around a lot of these topics for years now. So it's not like I didn't have anything to start with. I wasn't starting with a completely blank page. And I'd actually outlined a number of books a few times. So part of it was re-outlining, finding the flow, finding the stories that I could tell, and then blocking out time virtually every day to do the writing, and then
really cool.
And the other
what was that time
tasks.
block like? I mean, a couple hours, half the day? What were you investing for that?
It depended on the day. Yeah, sometimes I could just get a couple hours in, and sometimes I'd say, hey, I'm going to really block out a chunk and do half a day. Rarely would I do a full day. I don't have that in me to like just say I'm just writing or whatever, but I could do 2 to 4 hours.
That's cool.
Is the blocks that I would do.
One of my mentors and coaches, a guy named Rory Vaden, I've been a part of his coaching for a while, and he wrote a couple of great books and bestsellers, and his team has helped New York Times bestsellers launch their books. And he talked about writing one of his books. He did the first draft in a week. And it was an interesting thing to hear him describe, like, the content was already in me. I just needed to create the space for it to come out and hit the page. And he got his first draft done in a week. And I thought the same thing as you. Wow, that would be really tough to just do nothing but write for a whole week straight. That sounds exhausting to me. But
And
really
I know
amazing.
plenty of people that do that. They go on a retreat or something, they lock themselves
Just
in
crank it
and they
out.
spend a week or two and they say, I'm just writing the book and that's it. Usually they're storyboarding or
Yeah,
outlining
something
things
in
out before
advance.
they get
Yeah.
there. But yeah, some
When
people that's
when
their
did the
approach.
title when the title hit you? Was it there before you even started, or was it something you created like a poof along the way, or at the end you had to go brainstorm the title?
Yeah, the main title's been around for a little while. The word intentional kind of emerged as a theme for a lot of the work that I've been doing around helping people make intentional career transitions and upgrades
Yeah.
and also aligning that with living an intentional life. It's just emerged for me as a key focus word for some of the work that I've been doing and some of the themes that I've needed to be reminded of, right? That's one of the great things about doing some of this work is you get reminded of some of the great things
Yeah.
that you want to
Yeah.
integrate into your own life, right? And so some of the things that I even wrote in the book was like, oh man, this is what I need right now. And so that's fantastic. Even before the book came out, I named my LinkedIn newsletter the Intentional Engineer newsletter. So that name had been around for a while and I stuck with it and
Mm.
then just
It's
started
an
to.
awesome brand around Jeff Perry and the work that you do. I really see from the very first time we met and chatted on LinkedIn, however many years ago that
Yeah.
was, our last interview when I was on your podcast, there is a clear sense of intentionality in how you live and how you coach, and no question your clients benefit from that in their own journey. It's a great segue to my impression of what's in the book and the content and the arc that you've created for growth. And how do you shift from what I might call a default life or life without intention to a designed and intentional life and career? And there's so many things to unpack. And I do encourage everybody I meet, like, just go get a copy of the book and read it. But I'm curious for you, besides your own journey, I needed this and I've been through this, and this is sort of my life's work on the page. Who else inspired the content? Are there people you've worked with or others who really played a big role in why what's in the book is in the book?
It's a number of different forces, right? I mean, obviously, when you write a book, you're influenced by all the great books that you've read. And so I quote a whole bunch of other authors that I respect a lot, from the classic Stephen R. Covey to one of my favorite quotes in there is from Stephen Pressfield, who writes The War of
Oh,
Art. He talks
yes.
about resistance, and I love that. The chapters on mindsets were really inspired by one of my mentors, Ryan Gottfredson, who does a lot of work on mindsets and vertical development, as well as a couple of books by Harvard psychologists. Community of Change by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy, and the foundational mindset shifting research they've done over the last 25, 30 years is just really fantastic. And so some of the concepts I drew from there and referenced
Amazing.
there. So those are just a few
Yeah.
along the way.
Inspired pathways. You're right. If we trust King Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun. We're all
That's right.
pulling from this idea of what's been built before us. So, mindset, you mentioned that word. Jeff, if you were going to put the chapters on mindset into the fewest words possible, what is it that we need to begin with in our understanding of mindset in our career and life?
I had mindset in one chapter originally, and my editor was like, this chapter is way bigger than anything else you wrote. This needs to be 2 chapters. And so, okay, fine. So I've got a whole lot to say about this. But if we were to put it in a quick soundbite, it's that our mindset fuels our behavior and our behavior fuels our results. You can put another word there. Mindset drives behavior, behavior drives results. But who we are, which we might characterize as our mindset, or how we see the world, or our
Yeah.
opportunities and challenges and the people around us, absolutely determines how we show up, how we interpret experiences or things that happen to us or for us. That's a way we can frame it too. And then dictate the actions we take, the way that we show up with people, the way that people can tell we're oriented towards or away from them. And that's going to determine a lot of our results. And so just mindset being a foundational piece to saying, hey, I have a goal. I have something I want to accomplish. Okay, great. But if you're only prescribing the actions you're going to take and not actually considering what about you and the way you're thinking and seeing things needs to change, then it's very unlikely that that's going to be successful. So that's a quick start into the world of mindset.
I really like the simplicity and the impact of that statement. So my mindset fuels or drives my behavior. And no engineer is going to argue with the statement that my behavior, my actions, then drive or create the results that I'm getting. So if mindset is the starting point of that, from your experience and the research you've done and how you coach clients, is there any distinction between what is my mindset versus what am I thinking? How would you articulate mindset versus whatever I happen to be thinking right now?
The answer is yes and no. Mindset incorporates not just what is the conscious thoughts, but also our unconscious thoughts as well. So I can be thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, or what I think about Zach White and the kind of guy he is, or whoever else I'm talking to. And I can be thinking about that. But a lot of that internal stuff, which we would normally characterize as mindset, and the lens I see that is often unconscious. We're not even aware of it. And that's one of the things that's critical to the mindset transformation process, is to gain exposure, to gain awareness, to see things and observe things that right now are completely unconscious. So let me just,
can you walk us through that journey? So when you talk about that sort of mindset journey, I know in the book you walk through these stages. Could you tell us what they are and maybe link it to an example an engineer could relate to?
There's a model around changing or improving in any aspect, and I'd love to apply it to the mindset transformation process. It's a 4-stage model. You can think about it just like a kind of a step ladder. But stage 1 is the stage of unconscious incompetence. Okay. So if you identify anything that you want to improve in, here's something very common with like leaders that you and I work with is like, hey, I struggle with delegation, right? I was a fabulous engineer. Classic. I move into a leadership position and now I don't have control over everything. So I'm going to micromanage. I struggle with that delegation. Now, at first, someone who's moving through that transition may not be aware of just how much they struggle. It starts at unconscious incompetence. I'm bad at it, but I don't know that I'm bad at it. Okay. Then there's some moment of awareness that comes and we move to conscious incompetence. And this is painful. It's like, oh, okay, I realize that I've got some work to do here, but I'm still bad at it. Okay. And that's the moment of opportunity where we can say, I've got work to do. I'm going to put in that work to do that.
Don't downplay the importance of that moment. To your point, it's a painful moment. But I remind everyone, all change, all growth is preceded by awareness. Absolutely. If we don't have that somebody shining a light on our deficiencies, our gaps, our challenges moment, then the opportunity to keep climbing the ladder isn't there. So I celebrate that moment in my life, even though it's painful, because like, oh, okay, I just went from stage 1, unconscious incompetence, to conscious incompetence. At least now I can do something about it.
Yeah. Now you can work with it, right? So now, like I said, it's the moment of opportunity, right? And so now we're at conscious incompetence. Now, a lot of the work and the improvement we do is conscious work. We're literally firing our neurons and training our brain in a new way to think and do things differently. We need to be mindful as we take action, such as, hey, if I'm going to delegate differently, I need to think and believe and recognize what's actually happening. Perhaps some of those things that were holding me back from that were beliefs that I had around, if I delegate, fires are going to go off everywhere, right? Because I'm not the one controlling everything. We're talking about an engineering manager, a relatively new engineering manager, or maybe an experienced one, who wants to go through this process to improve their approach to delegation. But they might have some of those mindsets or fears or beliefs currently internally that are suggesting that if I don't do this and I delegate this, something's going to go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And fears that are holding us back. So this process then of moving from conscious incompetence to conscious competence, we have to be quite mindful of thinking about, are those beliefs that I've been hanging on to before that have actually been preventing me taking these actions that could be more helpful, are they actually happening? Are those fears actually coming to fruition? Most of the time, those fears are false, they're unfounded, and we can actually see when we're mindful about it that better things can happen when we do things in the right way. And therefore, that actually helps us when we're mindful of what's actually happening to diminish those beliefs and those fears and those negative mindsets that were holding us back previously.
So this is that when you said yes or no to the idea of thoughts and mindsets, is it the same? The yes piece could be when I get to conscious incompetence and now I start to have harmony in some of my awareness of subconscious thoughts, etc. But it's not uncommon for there to be an unconscious mindset or thing holding me back that I don't see. So while my thoughts are leaning in one direction, the actual thing driving my behavior is still hidden from view. And we would argue like that is a key component of mindset that should not be ignored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we might have that first moment of awareness that says, hey, I need to work on this, but then there's still more work that needs to be done to get some of those unconscious actual beliefs, the root cause, to continue to be more aware of and to fight against those over time, to build the awareness that usually those limiting beliefs or fears are just untrue, and to look for the evidence. So this is a cool thing for engineers. You can actually look for the evidence. We want to run experiments, take action, and collect data. What's actually true?
Okay, first of all, I'm an engineer. Who doesn't want to run a test? Let's just go design a test. I think that's a great frame for this, Jeff. So tell me, for you, is that the tactic or the approach that we want to apply when we think about climbing that ladder? It's like, if I'm struggling to get to the next level, what's the next test I need to run? And that's sort of the game that we need to go play to climb this mindset journey all the way to unconscious competence? Or how would you frame where that fits?
I love that concept of, can we take mindful action and consider it, we're just running an experiment, we're collecting the data, and in doing so, we're seeing what's actually true. And then that builds our mindsets in a way that eventually we believe those things in a more default mode. And that becomes, instead of conscious competence, where we have to think about it every single time we're doing what we previously wouldn't have done, now it becomes a more natural state of being and who we are, right, over time. But it comes down to a degree, at least one way you can look at it is we're just running experiments. We're putting a hypothesis into the scientific method. We're seeing what's actually true. The data says this is what I need to do. Well, that helps reinforce my belief about what I should be doing differently.
What has been your experience with someone's ability to climb that ladder and go through mindset transformation totally on their own? Do you say that's not possible, or it is possible but hard, or it's actually possible and quite easy if you know what to do? What would you say if someone wants to totally self-study their way through mindset transformation? Is that possible?
I would say it's rare, if not impossible. And just to share some data around different mindset levels, this comes from, I mentioned the book Immunity to Change by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. They actually characterized some different adult development mindsets as matches to adult development. And interestingly enough, there are a couple of childhood stages, but 3 main stages of adult development. And the vast majority of adults are in, they would consider stage 1, which is a codependent state. And this is like 64%. Okay.
Wow.
Next group is stage two, 35% of people are in that. This is more of an independent state. I'm the master of my own destiny, and I don't need to be told by anyone else what to do, and I'm going to go create my future. Stage three, which they would consider the highest stage of development, we might call interdependent, where I can see dichotomies and hold competing ideas
Yeah. Yeah.
and different things. Only 1% of people, of
Phew.
adults, actually develop or are developed at that stage. They even did research on executives. It's only 8% of executives. But
Wow.
85% in that second stage. So they were a lot more developed from like the stage one to stage
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
but even high level executives, like only 8%. When you look at data like that, it's like, okay, just not very many people do it, partially because we're unaware or unconsciously unaware
Yeah.
of this process. And it is hard work. And usually we need support in some form or fashion to help us
Yeah.
move through that.
I agree with that answer, Jeff. I've never by myself found like my breakthrough moments in my own mindset have never come because I just sat alone with a book or something. It's always been in the context of great coaching, great mentorship, great community of people on the journey with me. And you alluded to it in your story about writing your book. If that mentor or those peers in the program hadn't come alongside you and said, "Hey Jeff, when are you going to write your first book?" Like that was the catalyst moment. You probably don't have that awareness that you're ready now and you want to do it and this is the perfect time without that in your life. I've seen that for me too. You mentioned, I remember a story because, and the reason I thought of it, a lot of times we look at this work in our careers very results oriented. Plus, we're engineers, so we tend to think in objects and things and material context. But mindset work is about more than just bigger results at work and paychecks. It's this becoming that you talked about in our last conversation in episode 64 so well. And you mentioned someone who did this mindset work with you and had some really interesting things to say about what it meant in their life. Would you recount that for us?
I think I call him in the book Mario. I changed all the names from from people, but he was an experienced engineer. I think he was about 10 years into his career in the civil engineering side. And most people by that point in civil engineering have progressed to become project managers by that point. This is something he wanted to do, but he just hadn't gotten there for whatever reason. And so when we started working together, he was just on his way into a new job, not as a project manager, but as a civil
Okay.
engineer. And he's like, hey, I want to go into this job differently than I have before. And I want to do this differently on the path to becoming a project manager. And so we worked a whole lot on his awareness of his mindset. One of the mindsets that I write about in the book that I love, part of the foundation for me deciding to become a coach, was learning about the outward mindset from the Arbinger Institute. It's an orientation or a mindset around how we relate and see other people.
Hmm.
Okay. So the opposite of an outward mindset is an inward mindset, is where I see people as objects that I can either use to accomplish my own needs,
Mm.
or they're
Uh-oh.
in my way, or they're just irrelevant and I don't care about them, right? How often do we see people and we just don't care, or we only see them as obstacles in our way, right?
Mm.
Or we just want to use them to accomplish our own needs. So that's a self-focused view. An outward mindset suggests that we see people as people that matter like we matter, right? And so, in talking about these concepts and some of the ideas around it, Mario realized that he was seeing people as objects all the time.
Yeah.
He was only considering the conversations that he needed to do to get his task, get him done, and move on his way. He wasn't building relationships that were meaningful at all at work.
Mm.
And he just was seeing people in really transactional ways. All of
Sure.
his interactions
Yeah.
were transactional. After a few weeks, it didn't take that long, but he started adjusting some of the conversations that he was having, the questions he was asking, and the ways he was building relationships with people. It's like, man, I just feel like I'm a better human when I show up to work and the way that I interact with people. And,
Yeah.
statements
Yeah.
like that are just so fun to hear as a coach. to be like, yes, yes, that's what we want. We want to
Hmm.
build some better humans out there, right? That's great.
I mean, at the end of the day, Jeff, all of this personal development work comes back to that. If somebody wants promoted, they want a bigger paycheck, they want a bigger title, they want to work at a certain company. If you go do enough whys, the 5 whys on all of
Mhm.
these goals, at some level, we all just want to perceive ourselves as that better
Right.
version of ourselves and love the quality of our life, right? It's like,
Yeah. And even fight against like some of the, like, is it really about the promotion or whatever? Like I'm all for helping people level up in whatever ways they
right.
want to. But I had an interesting experience recently with a client, and I just got an email from him the other day who said, "Hey, I am as happy as I've ever been in my career right now, and I actually have a lower title than I used to have." Right? But he changed some other things. He did a lot of work on mindset. He's worked on his health, both physical and mental, because of some personal things that he was going through. And he's just a lot more settled personally
So good.
and finding joy in other things that are not tied to getting the promotion or whatever. And
Mm,
I think he will actually perform well and get a promotion in
exactly.
this new
I
job.
was just
And
going
it's
to say
great.
the same thing.
But
The happiness will drive bigger results
if
in the
that's what
future.
he wants, right? And
It's
he
good.
may want to keep life simpler because he's been a high-end engineering manager before. Now he's back to an individual contributor role. He actually wanted to do that after taking a career break for a few months. But
Yeah,
that's up to him. Either way, I'm pleased that he states that he's as happy with his career as he's ever
exactly.
been because he's
Exactly.
put other factors in play.
So good. Jeff, if we were going to pick one or two more of these really transformational shifts in mindset, you mentioned an incredibly powerful one with going from an inward to an outward mindset and how we see people, which, wow, engineers, we need that one. It's so easy because everything in our world is a formula, an equation, an object, an idea. And so to really focus on seeing people as people, that's huge. What are one or two others, places where if we can make this distinction and shift at an unconscious mindset level, it'll have a big impact in our life?
I'm sure you've had a bunch of folks who have come on the show who have talked about the growth mindset. It's probably the most common mindset principle that gets talked about. But if you go back to Carol Dweck's, who's the author of the book on mindset, the psychology of success, her TED talk, just using the concept that she talks about from her TED talk of the power of the word yet. I'm
Mm,
sure you've had this plenty of times. I've had it so many times where someone has come to me and said, "Hey, I'm not good at blank, insert networking with people, insert building relationships, insert public speaking, insert whatever that thing
yep.
is that they feel like
Yep.
I'm not good at this." Right. And if we can at least insert that extra word and just say, "Okay, fine, that may be true for the moment, but let's just add a growth mindset word and say, yet. You may not be good at it yet." But
Mm,
that extra word adds that layer of, okay, but I can be, or I will be, right?
yeah.
And that belief that how things are today do not have to be how they are
Mm.
tomorrow, right?
The whole growth mindset in a single 3-letter word.
Yeah,
I really
no,
love
that's
that.
it.
I
Yeah.
really love that because that you're right. It sets an expectation of growth in the future when you say that, which is really, really powerful. Okay, the power of yet, seeing people as people, not things. What's one more? If we were going to throw out some really transformational mindsets, if you really embrace it, where else would we go?
Yeah. Well, I would consider myself a recovering perfectionist,
Okay.
right? And perfection along the journey of a mindset transformation can be quite difficult because we expect to say, "Hey, here's the transformation I want," and yet I'm not quite fully aligned with that along the way. And so what I would share there is just say we need to trust the process, be patient, and focus on progress, not perfection
Yeah.
along the way. And invite that approach with the people around you who are watching this change happen and say, "Hey, this is my intent to go with the word intentional. This is the change I'm trying to make. I'm bringing you in on this, whether that's a spouse or a partner or a boss or a coworker or whoever that is, right? And say, this is the change I'm trying to make. It's probably not going to be instantaneous. I'm going to do my best, but I want you to help me and recognize things along the way. And I appreciate any feedback, right?
Really
And
good.
to bring that conversation in and allow people to be part of that process with you, they're going to be more willing to give you feedback. They're going to be more empathetic when
Yeah.
you aren't
Yeah.
quite aligned with your stated intention and expectation. And they're going to be supporters of you rather than you say, hey, this is what I'm going to be. And trying to say, yeah, well, you're not actually doing that. Like you said, you were like,
Sure. Sure.
you're inviting that vulnerability and that feedback in a different way instead of feeling like you need to be perfect all the time. So progress,
Progress
not
over
perfection.
perfection. Yes. 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 Jeff, this is amazing. There's so much more in your book. I'm curious. You made a comment earlier in our chat that sometimes when you're putting that content on the page, you look back at it and you're like, wow, that's really what I need to hear. If there was one thing in The Intentional Engineer that you're personally leaning into right now, it's kind of the big challenge or it's the area for growth that Jeff needs to focus on. What's that place where you wrote it for me, but it was really for you?
Yeah, there's a few places I'm sure, but the one that comes to mind is the concept of uncertainty and how difficult that is to move through sometimes. And I may have even shared this when we talked a couple years ago. I've been loving this quote, and I have to keep coming back to it over and over again. A quote by the psychologist Virginia Satir, I quote in the book. She says that many people prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty.
Oof.
Okay, so all too often we stay in a place or a situation or a mindset or whatever that is because it feels certain. It's what we know, right? Instead of moving through the change that is uncertain, because often that uncertainty feels more difficult than even the dark places we're in right now. And so leaning into that uncertainty is difficult for me in a lot of ways to say, I'm going to step out on a different realm. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to do something I've never done before. One of those things right now is I'm leaning into more opportunities for speaking and corporate engagements and training and workshops
Amazing.
and things. That's a new phase for me. That's a different approach. And there's a lot of uncertainty around it. But I'm excited about what's possible if I can lean into that and do that well. So
appreciate you sharing that. I'm right with you. I hear you on that. Every next step towards our vision is a step into the unknown. And there's no small part of the reason why Oasis of Courage was named Oasis of Courage, because it doesn't matter how far you go on the journey. That next step is still a step into the unknown. It's still uncertain. It doesn't go away. And I talk about getting out of the comfort zone a lot, which is not an uncommon message, but what you just said is so important because people associate comfort zone with something that feels good. Comfort is sitting on a beach in Hawaii, sipping Mai Tais and having the time of your life. It's like, no, the comfort zone for a lot of people is the certainty of misery that you just described. It can be really bad feeling. It can be uncomfortable experience, but it's your comfort zone. That's such a powerful point you made. I love it.
I had another mentor of mine who says, new level, new devil, right? Every time we level up, there's a new challenge, there's a new devil, there's a new set of thoughts that are coming after us.
Incredible. Jeff, if somebody wants to grab a copy of the book and get connected with you and explore not just mindset, but the entire body of work that is The Intentional Engineer, where's the best place for somebody to go?
theintentionalengineer.com. They can find that. It has links to go grab the book in print or Kindle, or the audiobook's out now as well. The other thing that I created with anyone who gets a copy of the book, because I don't know about you, I read a lot of books and sometimes I don't then go do something with that. I created a free digital workbook that creates a space for the end of every chapter, and within the chapters, there's a whole lot of actions reflection questions and
Sure.
activities to take. It's a very action oriented book. And so created a workbook that has space to then go do those actions, do those reflections, journal and write a lot, be introspective to do some of those activities. And so they can
Really
get that
good.
at theintentionalengineer.com/workbook.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah, you're calling me out, Jeff. It's a lot of times I'll read a book, put it right back on the shelf. Nothing happens. If I would read less and do more, I'd be better off. So really awesome. Grab a copy of the book, Happy Engineer. Go get the workbook. Go through this content. You will not regret doing that. We'll put the links in the show notes as well as ways to connect with Jeff on all the socials. So please do that. Jeff, last time when we finished, you and I talk about this a lot as coaches. Questions lead, answers follow. Asking great questions, asking better questions is essential if we want better answers and direction and an intentional life. And last time you shared the answer of who do you want to become? And I just loved that. We had a great chat about that. So, what do you say today? What's the question you would leave the happy engineer with coming out of this conversation?
So if you identify who you want to become, just get even that much more clear around why that's important to you. What are the factors around why that are motivating that at a deeper level that are saying that's who you really want to become in your profession, in your family, in your community, in your faith, all the different aspects of life. You identify who you want to become, but what are the reasons underneath that? Go back to Simon Sinek, start with why. Why is that important? When
Yeah,
you can identify that, then the motivation to become that person and do the actions that it will take to do that will be at least a little bit easier. Still going to be
I
hard, but
love
at
it.
least a little bit easier because you're tied to that deeper motivation.
Why do you want to become who you want to become? Jeff, thank you for this. Super great to see you again. Congrats on the publishing of your book, writing it in 3 months, hitting an incredible goal. So cool and incredible content. Thanks for your generosity to share it here. Keep changing the world, man, one life at a time. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, you too, Zach. So good to be with you. Thanks so much.